You cut off my power. In the middle of a storm. That's what I said. Barefoot, soaked, flashlight jammed between my teeth as rain pounded down in sheets. I was standing in the freezing wind wrapped in a blanket like a lost soul, and looking across the street at Karen. Yes, that Karen, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, who was sipping hot cocoa on her porch like she was watching a holiday movie instead of a hurricane tear through our neighborhood. Rules are rules, she said with a smile that didn't even flinch. My house was pitch black. No heat, no lights, no fridge. And she looked right at me, like my suffering was just another item on her to-do list. That's when something in me switched. She had no idea who she was messing with. The storm hadn't even knocked out power for anyone else. That was the first red flag. My neighbors' houses were glowing. Porch lights on, TVs flickering behind curtains. Even Dave's ridiculous inflatable flamingo was dancing in the wind like nothing was wrong. But my place, dead. Not a flicker. I thought it was a glitch. I mean, my home's tech is top tier. I've got backups for the backups. So I check my phone. Can't log into the system. Weird. I try again. Access denied. Then a new message slides in. Power service suspended due to HOA violation. Contact HOA administrator. That's when I knew this wasn't an accident. This was targeted, deliberate. Someone had gone out of their way to shut me down. So I dragged myself through the rain to the front gate, and there it is. Bright orange violation notice sealed in plastic, taped up like it was proud of itself. And right there at the bottom, unauthorized generator use. Immediate disconnection mandated. Signed, of course, by Karen. I literally laughed out loud. I don't even own a generator. I've got a solar system designed to kick in if the grid fails. But the grid hadn't failed. Karen just decided to play God with the electricity. And in that moment, standing in the rain like a character in a revenge movie, I realized something. This wasn't just pettiness. This was war. I marched across the cul-de-sac, puddles splashing under my feet, blanket clinging to my shoulders, absolutely fuming. Her porch light glowed like it was mocking me. I banged on her door and she waited, let me stand there shivering, before opening it with the fakest concern I've ever seen. "Oh, you lost power," she said, like it was news to her. "Karen," I said, cold fog escaping my mouth with every word. "Did you cut my power?" She didn't even blink. "No, the HOA did," she said, all proud of herself. Then came the speech. Some garbage about my solar system being non-compliant. That grid-tied backups can't auto-engage without review. She quoted HOA bylaws like they were federal law. "My backup wasn't even on," I snapped. "Even if it was, you don't have the authority to disconnect residential utilities." She smiled again. The kind of smile you see right before someone gets hit with karma. "Well, maybe we don't, but we did." She sipped her cocoa like she'd just checkmated me. "You'll have to submit a compliance review, pay the fine, and wait for board approval. You know the drill." I stood there, soaked, staring at the glowing windows behind her, her cozy, lamplit living room casting this warm yellow glow like something out of a magazine. And I swear, something shifted in me. Not anger, not even vengeance. Something sharper, cleaner, cold. I stopped speaking, turned around mid-sentence, and walked away without another word. She thought she'd won. Let her. I was done playing fair. Back at my house, I didn't dry off, didn't change clothes. I walked straight to the utility room, behind a locked door, behind another layer of biometric access, past the place where the HOA thinks wires end and magic happens. I stepped into my command center, a fully outfitted control suite. The air buzzed as the monitors lit up one by one. Diagnostic dashboards, power flow maps, real-time utility analytics, and dead center, On the main panel, it greeted me, "Welcome, Administrator." Here's what Karen never knew. She thought I was just another guy in the neighborhood, just another lawn to inspect, just another porch light to file complaints about. But I'm not just a homeowner. I own the company that supplies power to her house. Her cocoa-sipping empire runs on my infrastructure. I'm the CEO of the regional utility provider. Every meter, every smart switch, every solar integration point in this entire subdivision falls under my jurisdiction. Karen wasn't dealing with some guy who forgot to pay his HOA dues. She had picked a fight with the one person in this zip code who writes the compliance codes. And the only reason she managed to cut off my house was because she found some obscure clause buried in a 5-year-old stack of outdated acquisition paperwork, one that hadn't been flagged since the merger. That was on me. But that loophole wouldn't stay open for long. I sat down at my desk, rain still dripping off my clothes onto the floor, fingers already flying across the keyboard. Pulled up logs, access records, timestamps. And there it was. 3 hours before the storm hit, a call to the private HOA support line. Karen had used her outdated admin credentials to manually request a disconnect. The junior tech on call probably just wanted to get through the shift, saw the HOA flag, greenlit the disconnect without question, a total 1 in a million fluke. Karen had taken advantage of it like a snake finding a crack in the foundation. I stared at the screen for a long moment. I could have hit one key and restored my power in seconds. Could have overridden the suspension and gone back to binge-watching my show. But this wasn't about convenience anymore. This was about sending a message. Because people like Karen only understand one thing: power. And I don't mean porch light power. I mean the kind that flows through fiber optics and high-voltage lines. The kind you don't even see, but you rely on every second of every day. She thought she controlled the switch. She didn't even know which panel it was in. So I didn't turn the lights back on. I opened a new file. I named it Sector 19B, Audit. And I started building something way better than revenge. I started building proof. Instead of restoring my power, I sat in that cold room, listening to the rain hammer the roof, and started pulling threads. I wanted to see just how far Karen had overstepped, because one unauthorized shutdown wasn't a rogue move. It was a pattern. And the more I looked, the clearer it became. Karen had been using her HOA seat not to enforce order, but to control people. I pulled her call logs, every tech request she'd made under those outdated credentials, and discovered this wasn't her first time pushing limits. In fact, over the last 6 months, she'd issued 9 manual override requests, all rubber-stamped by junior techs who didn't know any better. Half of them were flagged for non-compliance that turned out to be minor issues: solar arrays, battery backups, smart meter lag. The kind of stuff we normally review automatically, not cut over. She'd been picking favorites, punishing people she didn't like. And now she'd added me to that list. That was her mistake. While digging through her logs, I cross-referenced HOA meeting notes. Yes, I have access to those too, and wouldn't you know it? Karen had been pushing for more emergency authority over power usage. She called it storm management in the minutes, but what it really meant was cherry-picking who got to keep the lights on. She was laying the groundwork for full control, and nobody in the neighborhood even knew it. I compiled every document, every audio snippet from the support line, every HOA record where she exaggerated compliance concerns, and added it all to the case file. I even flagged her as a potential internal threat, which, in our system, triggers a full compliance sweep. By noon the next day, 2 of my people were quietly auditing Sector 19B, the entire HOA zone. We didn't show up in marked vans. No clipboard tapping guys in hard hats. This was all digital, quiet, and surgical. The kind of thing you do when you're preparing to dismantle a system from the inside out. Then came the alerts, one by one. The clubhouse, drawing 10 times its usual off-peak load. Turned out the hot tub had been wired into the building with unapproved hardware, likely installed by someone's cousin who used to do electrician work. Karen's cousin, in fact. Unit 8. He was also, according to system logs, drawing power 24/7 at rates that didn't match residential behavior. I rerouted his load through a usage diagnostic, and it spiked instantly. He was running multiple crypto rigs in his basement, full-blown mining operation hidden under the HOA's radar. And the kicker. His power was being pulled through a buried line that tapped into the main clubhouse feed. That clubhouse, under Karen's domain, authorizations, all signed by her. She wasn't just a power-hungry HOA president. She was running her own private grid inside mine, using infrastructure she had no idea how to manage. Things escalated fast. Multiple homes in the neighborhood had smart meters that had either been tampered with or swapped entirely. Non-compliant models, most of them manual bypasses, meaning someone had physically removed the secure meters and installed older units with less oversight. All the paperwork traced back to one signature: Karen's. My jaw tightened. She hadn't just broken rules, she'd broken laws. Federal utility laws. Tampering with regulated grid infrastructure isn't a fine-worthy offense. It's a felony. And she was signing off on it like she was organizing a bake sale. 2 days after the audit began, I received an invitation to the monthly HOA board meeting. Under normal circumstances, I'd ignore it. I paid my dues, kept my lawn tidy, and left the drama to the people who needed it. But this time, I accepted. Not as myself, though. That would have tipped my hand too soon. No, I sent someone else. Nolan. Nolan is one of those people who makes everyone uncomfortable. Not because he's weird, but because he remembers everything and never blinks. Retired tech consultant. Spent 20 years auditing companies for compliance violations. He's the kind of guy who brings a binder to a birthday party. I briefed him, loaded him up with the full case file, and fed him every detail from the shadows. When the meeting started, Nolan walked in dressed like your average retiree, cargo shorts, windbreaker, ball cap. He looked like someone who got lost on the way to a shuffleboard tournament. Perfect cover. Karen was already at the podium, glowing with self-importance, introducing new HOA proposals. Things like personal energy allowances during storms, scheduled shutdowns for overuse, and stricter approval processes for solar backups. In short, total control disguised as preparedness. She was laying the groundwork for her little empire to get codified. Then Nolan raised his hand. "Just a quick question," he said casually. "Do these proposed changes apply to everyone, or just the people Karen doesn't like?" You could feel the room shift. Karen gave him a look I'd seen her use on teenagers who left skateboards near her hedges. "These apply equally," she replied tightly, "across all residents." Nolan nodded. "Great. Then I'm sure you won't mind me reading a few things into the record." He opened the folder. Calm, deliberate, started listing off the usage stats of the clubhouse, the exact dates and times of unauthorized disconnections. And then he pulled out the HOA charter, flipped to page 43, and read the clause that said all power-related decisions must be executed by licensed professionals contracted through a certified utility provider. Not HOA board members, not Karen. She tried to interrupt. Nolan didn't even look up, just kept reading. Then, with a smile, he dropped the final blow. "As of this morning, your entire neighborhood has been reclassified as a conditional use community by the provider. You'll receive your updated rate structure by Monday." Karen froze. "You can't do that!" she shouted. Nolan smiled like he'd been waiting for that line. "We already did. And you should know. Manual overrides, infrastructure tampering, and unauthorized shutdowns all carry penalties under our grid protection protocols." If this continues, your entire HOA may be reclassified as a commercial entity. The room went silent. A few people gasped. One guy in the back literally stood up and said, "Wait, Karen did what?" Another woman, one I recognized as living 3 houses down, said her freezer full of groceries had gone bad during the storm. She demanded reimbursement. It was chaos. Karen tried to regain control, shouting over the noise that she was protecting the neighborhood. Nolan waited, then asked the most important question of the night. Protecting us from what? The only house that lost power was the one that owns the company powering your lights. Dead silence. You could hear the hum of the old ceiling fan above them. Karen's face went pale. She'd gone too far, and now everyone knew it. The fallout didn't take long. By that evening, the HOA group chat, the same one Karen used like her personal announcement board, completely melted down. Messages flew in faster than anyone could read them. Screenshots of power bills, photos of spoiled food, accusations, theories, even memes started to pop up. Someone changed the group name to Gridlocked. One woman uploaded a photo of her freezer's contents, ruined beyond recognition, writing in all caps, "4 lasagnas, Karen." Another asked, "Why does the clubhouse hot tub work during an outage, but my dad on oxygen can't run his machine?" That one hit hard. That one made people angry. There's petty power moves, and then there's endangering lives. Karen's supporters, the ones who used to defend her every HOA citation and ridiculous parking complaint, went noticeably quiet. A few even left the chat. Others started asking real questions. Why Karen had been given access to override power, what else she'd been hiding, and who the hell she thought she was. Then the revised bill hit the HOA inbox. Triple the usual rate. A detailed line-by-line breakdown of unauthorized usage, tampered meters, infrastructure violations, and penalties under commercial and conditional use guidelines. The number, $17,243.89, not including late fees, which would accrue daily if not addressed. Karen exploded. She sent a furious multi-paragraph email to the utility company demanding to speak to someone in charge. She got an auto-reply thanking her for her inquiry and informing her that her message had been placed in the queue. I read her email while eating popcorn, but I wasn't done. The next morning I scheduled something she never saw coming, a standard municipal infrastructure audit. Just a little box checked in a system. But once that box is checked, the gears move fast. 2 days later, the city sent inspectors to the neighborhood. Yellow-jacketed technicians stepped out of vans, carrying thermal scanners, conduit readers, and clipboards. Karen came sprinting out of her house in a pink robe, demanding to know what was going on. One of the inspectors calmly replied, "Routine inspection. Just ensuring public safety in flagged communities." Then they got to work. And they found everything. They traced an illegal underground cable from her cousin's house to the HOA office, hidden inside PVC piping that hadn't been sealed correctly, now rotting and warped. They found a bypassed smart meter wired directly to Karen's garage. Her own house was drawing power without accurate billing. Then came the pool system. Her old, out-of-code water heater was hooked into a grid line that hadn't been in use for years, until she quietly rerouted it. She shouted that raccoons must have chewed the wires. The inspector didn't even try to hide the smirk. Do raccoons usually install surge protectors? The neighborhood watched it unfold, piece by piece, in real time. No one helped her. No one stepped in. In fact, people stayed on their lawns, sipping coffee or holding phones, watching like it was the main event. That's when Karen realized something. She hadn't just lost control, she'd lost the room. She'd lost the neighborhood. 2 nights later, an emergency HOA meeting was called. Not by Karen, but by the residents. Karen tried to shut it down, citing unfair targeting and harassment. But nobody was listening to her anymore. The meeting went ahead, packed tighter than any in recent memory. Residents showed up holding printouts of their inflated power bills, screenshots of grid alerts, and notes from the city inspection. A woman from Unit 3 brought a literal grocery bag full of thawed frozen food. One man, clearly fed up, slammed a flashlight on the table and yelled, "In case she cuts my power next." Then came the moment. A man named Edgar, retired judge, quiet type, lived on the corner, stood up with a folder in his hand and calmly read the HOA charter aloud. He flipped to a clause buried near the end, one almost no one had ever paid attention to, except him. It said that any HOA board member acting outside of their authority or putting residents at risk could be immediately recalled by vote, as long as they were in good standing with all utility and community services. Karen wasn't. Her utility account had been flagged and locked pending review. That made her ineligible to vote, and under the same clause, so were her allies, anyone benefiting from tampered meters or unauthorized infrastructure. They couldn't vote to save her. The floor opened for a motion. It didn't take long. One after another, hands went up. The count wasn't even close. In less than 15 minutes, Karen was officially removed as HOA president. She tried to interrupt, to object, to call it illegal. Nobody listened. Someone passed around a basket of cookies from Doey, the soft-spoken grandmother who was voted in as interim president on the spot. Karen shouted that this was a coup, that it was mob justice. Someone from the back of the room yelled, "Mob justice powered by the grid, baby." The place erupted. People were laughing, hugging. One resident even started clapping ironically as Karen packed up her things from the front table. And then, as she stormed out, furious, humiliated, someone played a recording from their phone, loud and clear. Karen's voice from a previous meeting, smug and sharp. "It's not tampering if nobody reports it." The room erupted again. Laughter this time. But beneath the laughter was something else. Relief. People weren't just happy she was gone. They were free. Karen didn't just vanish. People like her don't go quietly. They double down, dig deeper, twist the rules until they snap. That's exactly what she did. While most people would have taken their removal as a sign to step back, maybe rethink a few things, Karen chose a different route. She vanished from the group chats, stopped showing up to meetings, pulled the blinds on her house, and started whispering about retaliation. I started hearing from neighbors, rumors that she was planning a comeback, not through votes or procedural appeals, but by going after the grid directly. That's when I first heard the name Kyle. According to whispers, Karen had brought in a guy, a tech genius, some hacker who knew how to break into the system. She told people, quietly, only to those still willing to answer her texts, that he could bypass smart meters, override security, rewire anything. Said he once jailbroke a smart fridge and ran a hydroponic farm off stolen juice. It sounded like nonsense. A bad spy movie plot. Until I realized she wasn't bluffing. Kyle was real. Early 20s, pale, cocky. Walked around with a laptop covered in anime stickers and a look like he knew something you didn't. Claimed he was her nephew, but no one ever saw him at family gatherings. He'd loiter near transformer boxes, scope out the maintenance shed behind the clubhouse, accidentally peek inside utility panels. Problem was, the entire neighborhood was now under passive surveillance. Every panel, every box, every pole, rigged with tamper sensors and motion flags. Kyle didn't know it, but the second he stepped off the sidewalk and touched a service conduit, the system logged him. 3 days in, he made his move. Just after dusk, he slipped behind Karen's house to access the panel that once powered her cousin's crypto setup. He pried open the old service cover and started poking around with a screwdriver, and some kind of diagnostic dongle. The tamper alert tripped immediately. Nearby, a utility pole lit up with a red LED flash. The motion sensor caught the movement. Then came the real surprise. My drone, disguised as a birdwatching unit, dropped from its perch and activated its warning system. A loud mechanical voice blared from the speakers. "Unauthorized access detected. Step away from the conduit." Kyle froze, eyes wide, screwdriver still in hand. He panicked, bolted, slipped in wet grass, and landed flat on his back with a loud oof. Karen, who'd been watching from her back porch with a glass of boxed rosé, screamed like she'd just seen a UFO land. The footage was beautiful. I packaged it up, trimmed the silence, sharpened the audio, and emailed it, anonymously, to every resident in the HOA with the subject line, "Your grid, your rules." It didn't take long for it to spread. Within hours it was on social media. Someone added music. Someone else cut it with reaction GIFs. A kid from down the block made a meme series called Karen and Kyle Versus. The drone. Karen tried to spin it, said she was stress testing the system for safety. No one bought it, not even the people who once defended her. She became a joke overnight. Local media picked it up. A segment on the evening news ran under the title, "When HOA Goes Too Far." The footage was blurry, but clear enough to show her pointing at the drone, yelling something about power cartels, while Kyle ducked behind a recycling bin. And then came the cherry on top. My legal team had been compiling everything. Her override attempts, the bribery offer she made during her emergency board meeting, and now this attempted hack on critical grid infrastructure. We didn't pursue full charges, but we didn't have to. A single letter was hand-delivered to Karen's mailbox, official letterhead, Department of Energy seal, direct from our federal compliance liaison. It cited multiple violations and included the phrase, "pending regulatory review." That's the kind of language that makes people faint. Literally. Because Karen did. A neighbor across the street caught it. Karen opening the letter, reading the first paragraph, then crumpling to the ground like a lawn chair in high wind. Her last supporter, Leo, the guy who once declared Karen is the HOA, tried to rally her back into power. He called a meeting, made a dramatic speech, asked for a vote of reinstatement. He got booed off the stage. Someone threw a flashlight at his feet and said, "In case she cuts your power again." It was over. The new HOA president, Dewey, handled the transition with more class than I could have hoped for. She suspended every fine Karen had issued under false pretenses, cancelled all enforcement related to utilities until new policies could be drafted in partnership with my company. She even invited me to speak at the next meeting. I declined politely and sent Nolan with a tray of cinnamon rolls and a little card that read, "May your circuits always be stable." That meeting was different. Neighbors smiled, people laughed. Some even thanked Nolan for standing up when no one else could. A woman stood and read a letter, thanking the board for protecting her father, who needed medical equipment. A young couple proposed a grid awareness weekend to educate people on energy safety and usage. Someone in the back shouted, "Let's call it Power Fest." And just like that, a new tradition was born. Powerfest became the symbol of everything that changed. The HOA clubhouse was cleaned, repainted, and fitted with solar panels from a grant I arranged through my company's green initiative. A digital energy board was installed inside. Live updates on usage, weather alerts, even emergency status indicators. At the bottom, engraved in brushed steel, was a simple line. "Never let someone who doesn't understand the system be in charge of the switch." And below that, a tiny drone etched in pixel art. At the dedication ceremony, people laughed, cheered, took selfies with the display. One resident tapped the drone engraving and said, "That little guy deserves an HOA seat." Kids ran around with LED lanterns I donated as party favors. People danced, music played. The entire neighborhood, for the first time in years, felt like a community again, not a war zone ruled by petty vendettas. And then, as if summoned by fate or pride, Karen made one final appearance. She hadn't shown her face in weeks. But on the day of Powerfest, right as the sun began to dip behind the trees, she stepped onto her porch, wearing an oversized sun hat and giant sunglasses, like a celebrity in hiding. She didn't walk over. She just stood there, clutching a mug, watching the celebration unfold. For a second, no one noticed. Then a group of teenagers saw her. One of them shouted, "Hey, Karen! Want to charge your phone? We've got power." That broke the spell. Laughter rippled across the lawn. Karen turned and walked back inside without saying a word. That was the last time I ever saw her in person. A few weeks later, her house went on the market. The listing sat for months. Agents tried to explain the history delicately. Recent change in community leadership. Unique HOA history. Stable power infrastructure. Eventually, she sold it to an out-of-state couple who had no idea who she was. When the U-Haul pulled away from the curb, a neighbor snapped a photo and posted it to the group chat with the caption, "The power has left the building." Now, whenever new residents move in, they get a welcome basket, a handbook, and a quick summary of the Karen incident. Not out of spite, but as a lesson. A reminder that power, real power, isn't about control. It's about trust, transparency, and respect. It's about knowing that behind every switch and every socket, there are people, systems, responsibility. And if someone ever forgets that again, well, let's just say the grid remembers.